The wind outside howled against the small wooden house. Inside, the man sat near the dim glow of a dying lamp, flipping through an old book. The night was quiet, too quiet. Then he heard it. Soft, scraping sounds from the kitchen. At first, he thought it was the window shaking, or maybe a rat searching for crumbs. But the noise was different, slow and nervous, as if someone was trying not to be heard. His chest tightened, and he rose from his chair without making a sound. He took cautious steps across the creaking floor, holding his breath as the sound grew clearer. It wasn't random. Someone was moving in his kitchen. He reached for the iron rod he kept near the door, his fingers curling around the cold metal. His mind raced. Bandits sometimes roamed this area, thieves who would kill for scraps of food. He braced himself and walked into the kitchen doorway. There she was. A thin figure stood in the faint moonlight, spilling through the window. Her back was hunched, her hands trembling as they reached toward a half loaf of bread left on the counter. The man froze. It wasn't a thief with a weapon. It was a woman, but not human. Her skin was pale silver, her frame so fragile he wondered how she was even standing. Her clothes hung in tatters, more rags than fabric. Her hair, once long and smooth, was tangled and dull. He saw her lips quivering, whispering words he didn't understand as she tried to tear a piece of the bread without making noise. The man's grip on the rod loosened. His first instinct was to shout, to demand who she was and why she had broken in. But he stayed silent, watching. Something in the way her shoulders shook told him she wasn't here to harm anyone. She was starving. Her whole body trembled as if it might collapse at any moment. He stepped closer, and the wooden floor groaned under his foot. She froze. Her head snapped toward him, and wide, terrified eyes met his. They glowed faintly in the dark, like two small stars filled with panic. The bread slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she stumbled back, pressing herself against the wall like a cornered animal. "Please," her voice cracked. The word was rough, broken by hunger and fear. She raised her hands as if to shield herself. "Don't hurt me." The man lowered the rod slowly. He could see her ribs pressing through her thin chest, her arms shaking so badly it seemed even lifting them was painful. Her knees looked ready to give out. She wasn't lying. She was desperate. He looked at the fallen bread on the floor, then at her. She hadn't run. She hadn't attacked. She just stared at him with eyes filled with shame, as if she already expected to be beaten or thrown out into the cold. He took a step forward, and she flinched hard, whimpering like she thought he was going to strike her. His heart clenched. What had she been through to fear him so much? She whispered again, voice trembling. I was hungry. Only food, just food." Tears slipped down her dirty cheeks. She was breathing fast, as though she expected the worst. For a long moment, the man stood there, silent. The night stretched heavy around them, the ticking of the clock on the wall the only sound. He thought of how empty the world outside was, how the villages had been ruined by war, how survivors sometimes wandered without shelter. He thought of how easy it would be to throw her out, to keep himself safe. But he saw her knees buckle, her body sinking down until she crouched low, covering her face as though she couldn't bear to look at him anymore. The rod slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. The sound made her flinch again, but instead of shouting, he bent down and picked up the bread. He held it out toward her. She stared at him, confused. Her lips parted, but no words came. "Eat," he said softly. Her eyes darted from his face to the bread and back again. She shook her head slowly, as if she didn't believe what she was hearing. But her body betrayed her. Her stomach growled loudly in the silence, and fresh tears filled her eyes. She reached out, hands trembling, then pulled them back, afraid it was a trick. He pushed the bread a little closer. "Take it." This time, she snatched it quickly, almost like a starving animal protecting a meal. She tore into it with weak bites, chewing fast, as if someone might snatch it away. Crumbs spilled across her lap, but she didn't stop until half the loaf was gone. Then she froze again, staring at him with wide, wet eyes. "Why?" she whispered. The word cracked in her throat. "Why? Give me food?" The man didn't answer right away. He just watched her, his chest heavy with something he couldn't name. She looked so small, so broken, sitting on his floor, clutching bread like it was life itself. Finally, he said, "Because you needed it." Her tears fell freely then, and she pressed the bread against her chest as if it were more precious than gold. Her body shook, not from fear now, but from the release of all the pain she had been carrying. The silence of the house felt different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was fragile, tender, almost human, despite the gulf between them. The man took a deep breath. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but tonight a starving intruder had entered his home, and instead of danger, she had brought something else, something that pulled at his soul in ways he couldn't explain. She curled up near the corner of the kitchen, clutching the last of the bread, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Her voice was faint as she whispered, "Thank you, human." And for the first time in a long while, the man felt the weight of his loneliness ease, replaced by something new, something that might grow into a story neither of them expected. The fire crackled softly in the small stove, filling the kitchen with a faint warmth. The man placed a pot of water to boil, his movements steady and calm, though his mind was racing. Behind him, the alien woman sat curled in the corner of the room, clutching the last piece of bread as if it were her only shield. Her eyes followed him cautiously, unsure if the kindness he had shown a moment ago would last. Her hands shook when she lifted the bread to her lips again, nibbling in small bites now, slower, as though afraid it might vanish. Every time the man moved, she stiffened, her gaze darting between the door and the window like a creature expecting a trap. He poured some rice into the boiling pot, added a little salt, and stirred. The smell began to spread, filling the cold air with something almost comforting. The woman's nose twitched, and she closed her eyes for a second, breathing in the steam like it was more valuable than gold. He noticed how hollow her cheeks looked, how sharp her bones pressed against her skin. She had not known a real meal in a long time. When he placed a bowl in front of her, she froze. Her wide eyes stared at it, then at him, as though waiting for him to snatch it away or laugh at her suffering. His voice was calm when he said, "Eat." Her fingers hovered above the bowl. She whispered, almost to herself, "Hot food?" as if the idea was too strange to believe. Then she touched the bowl, flinching at the warmth before lifting it closer. Her first sip was desperate, her throat moving as she swallowed too quickly. The steam made her cough, but she kept drinking, spoon after spoon, until her shoulders shook and tears began running down her cheeks. She tried to hide her face, turning away from him, but her voice broke through the silence. "Why? Why would a human feed me?" The man leaned back in his chair, watching her. He didn't answer right away. Part of him wondered the same thing. He lived a quiet life, never trusting strangers, especially not aliens. Yet here he was, cooking for one who had broken into his home. Something about the way she clutched the bowl like it was the most precious thing in the world stirred something deep inside him. She slowed down after a while, her body no longer in panic mode. She placed the half-empty bowl on her lap and looked at him, her lips trembling. "I should not be here," she whispered. "If they find me, they will punish me. They will punish you too." The man said nothing. He could hear the weight behind her words. There were rules in this colony. Stray aliens, especially those without clan or husband, were seen as burdens, sometimes even thieves. If discovered, she would be dragged away. He knew it, and so did she. That was why her eyes kept flicking to the door, why she shook even while eating. "Do you want me to leave?" she asked suddenly, her voice sharp with fear. Her hands tightened around the bowl, ready to run, even though her weak body clearly wouldn't carry her far. He studied her carefully. She was thin, yes, but there was something else in her eyes, a mix of pride and despair. She was not just begging for food. She was fighting shame, fighting the part of herself that hated being this helpless. She expected him to push her out, maybe even strike her for trespassing. "No," he said simply. She blinked, stunned. "No? Eat," he repeated. "Finish it." Her lips parted, but no words came. For a long time, she just stared at him, her throat working as though she couldn't swallow the truth of his kindness. Finally, she bent her head and took another spoonful, slower this time, as if trying to memorize the taste of warmth itself. As she ate, she began to talk in a low voice, her words broken but clear enough. "I lost my husband in the war. He was all I had. When he died, his family cast me out. They said I was cursed. I walked from village to village, but no one would give me food. They saw me as useless, a widow without children. Her eyes glistened with fresh tears, but she forced herself to continue. I tried to beg, but people looked at me like dirt. Tonight, I thought maybe I would not wake up again. But then, I smelled food. Her voice cracked on the last words. She gripped the bowl tighter, as if afraid it would vanish. The man felt a heaviness in his chest. He had known loss too, though he never spoke of it. He understood the silence of grief, the way it hollowed people out. Looking at her now, shivering in his kitchen, he realized she wasn't just hungry. She was broken, abandoned by everyone she knew. When she finished the last of the meal, she set the bowl down carefully, as if it was sacred. Then she looked at him, her eyes shining with a question she could not voice. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft hiss of the stove. Finally, she whispered, "You are different." The man shook his head. "No, just human." Her lips trembled again, and she pressed a hand against her mouth, hiding the sound of a sob. She leaned back against the wall, her body slowly relaxing for the first time in what looked like years. Her breathing steadied, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. He stood and gathered the bowl, placing it in the sink. When he turned back, she was watching him still, but there was something new in her gaze, something fragile, almost like hope. She curled up again, but this time not like a hunted animal, more like someone clinging to the edge of safety. Her last words before sleep claimed her were faint but clear. "Thank you for giving me life tonight." The man stood in the quiet kitchen, the fire's glow dancing on the walls. He knew the danger of keeping her, knew what others would say if they found out. Yet none of that mattered at this moment. All he saw was a woman who had come into his house starving, expecting cruelty, and found kindness instead. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, he felt it was only the beginning of something far greater than a single warm meal. The night was deep and quiet, but inside the small house, the warmth of the fire softened the shadows. The alien woman sat on the floor, her knees pulled close to her chest, while the human man sat across from her at the wooden table. Between them lay silence, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy with things unsaid, with questions that lingered in the air. She held the empty bowl in her lap like a treasure, her thin fingers stroking its rim as though the warmth of the food still clung to it. Her eyes were half closed, but she fought sleep. There was something in her that refused to let go, as though closing her eyes meant waking up back in the cold streets, alone and starving again. The man noticed. He leaned back in his chair, watching the way she pressed her shoulders against the wall, the way her gaze kept darting to the door even though it was locked. She was still afraid, even here. At last she whispered, "You should not have helped me." The man raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Her lips trembled before she answered. "Because I am not worth it." Her voice cracked and she bowed her head. "I am nothing now, a widow, no family, no place. My husband is dead and with him everything ended. I should have died too." The words struck him like cold steel. He stayed silent, letting her speak. He could see the pain weighing her down, the way her body seemed to shrink under it. She pulled the rags tighter around herself. "When my husband lived, I had a home, a name, a future. But when he fell in the war, his family cast me out. They said I was cursed, that I had brought death to their bloodline. They took the little I had, the house, the food, even the clothes I wore. I was nothing but shame to them." Her voice shook with anger and sorrow. "I begged them, but they pushed me into the streets. I walked until my feet bled. No one cared. No one even looked at me. To them, a widow is already dead." Her eyes glistened in the firelight. She looked at him, not expecting comfort, but almost daring him to turn her away like everyone else. Instead, he said nothing. His calm gaze did not carry judgment. That silence unnerved her. She wiped her face roughly with the back of her hand. "Do you know what it is like to beg for crumbs, to be spat at, to be treated like dirt when you once had a name, once had respect?" Her words spilled out now, fast and bitter. "I used to be someone. I used to laugh, to eat at a table with others. And now, I steal scraps like a rat. I broke into your house ready to be beaten, ready to be killed, just for one more taste before I died." The man's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. He wanted to speak, but no words felt right. He could only picture her wandering through ruined roads, starving, her body weaker each day. He thought of her trembling hands when she took the bread, her desperate eyes. She had been living on the edge of death, and no one had cared. Her voice softened suddenly, like a child's. "Do you think me a thief?" He shook his head. "No." She blinked at him, startled. "Then what am I to you?" He leaned forward slightly. "Hungry." For a moment, she simply stared at him. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her chest rose and fell quickly, and her eyes shone again with tears she tried to hold back. She was used to insults, to being told she was worthless. No one had ever answered her with a word so simple, so human. She looked away, staring at the fire. "Hungry," she repeated in a whisper, as if testing the word, as though it might carry more meaning than she first thought. The man stood and took her empty bowl, setting it on the counter. She watched him, her body tense, as if expecting him to demand repayment. Instead, he sat back down, folding his arms. "You could have called the guards," she said, her voice low. "You could have thrown me out." "I could have," he replied, "but you didn't." "No." She studied him, her silver eyes narrowing. "Why?" The man looked at the fire for a long moment before answering. His voice was quiet but firm. "Because you are alive, and that is reason enough." Her breath caught. She turned her face away quickly, but he saw her shoulders shaking. She tried to wipe her tears without letting him notice, but she failed. The sob that escaped her chest was sharp and raw, a sound she seemed ashamed to make. She curled tighter against the wall, whispering brokenly. "You don't understand. My people, they don't see it that way. A widow is nothing, a mouth without worth. They say I should die quietly, that I should not take food from those who deserve to live. And I believed them. I thought maybe they were right." Her voice cracked, and her hands clutched her thin arms as though she could hold herself together. Until tonight. The man felt something heavy shift inside him. He had lived alone for years, keeping to himself, never opening his door to strangers. But looking at her now, he knew something had changed. This wasn't pity. It wasn't obligation. It was something deeper, a pull he couldn't explain. The fire flickered, casting both their shadows long against the walls. The woman's voice grew softer, trembling but steady enough to carry her heart. "Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I am not meant to die yet. Not if even a human can see me." Her words hung in the air like fragile glass. She pressed her face into her hands, hiding the tears that kept coming. But for the first time in years, those tears were not only of grief. They were of release, of finding even a small piece of mercy in a world that had shown her none. The man sat quietly, letting her cry, his presence a silent shield. He didn't move to touch her or speak empty words. He simply stayed, a steady shape in the firelight, proof that she was not invisible. When her sobs finally faded, she leaned her head back against the wall, her eyes half closed and weary. Her last whisper before sleep claimed her was faint, but carried through the stillness. "Thank you for seeing me." The man did not answer, but in the quiet of the night, he knew those words would stay with him longer than anything else. The night had grown colder, and the fire had burned low, leaving only faint embers glowing in the stove. The human man leaned against his chair, half watching the woman in the corner. She had eaten and spoken of her past, but even after that, he could see the fear that clung to her like a second skin. Her eyes darted toward the door every few minutes, as if she expected soldiers or neighbors to burst in at any moment. Her body was tense, coiled up like she was ready to flee, though she had nowhere to go. She whispered suddenly, her voice sharp with panic, "They will find out." The man frowned. "Who?" "Your people," she said, pulling the ragged fabric tighter around herself. "If they know I am here, they will punish me. They will punish you too. I have seen it happen before. Hungry widows, desperate ones, dragged away, beaten, sometimes worse. They don't forgive trespassers, not even if the crime is only bread." Her breathing quickened, and her hands gripped her knees so tightly her knuckles turned pale. The man stayed silent for a moment, his jaw tightening. He knew she was right. The colony had rules, harsh ones. Stray aliens without clan or permit were treated like pests, not people. If the guards came here and saw her, they wouldn't ask why she broke in. They wouldn't care about hunger or grief. She would be thrown into the streets again, maybe taken far away and never seen again. And if they thought he helped her, he would be marked as a traitor. The woman leaned forward, her voice almost a plea. "Please, you must tell me to leave. If they come and find me here, you will suffer. I do not want you destroyed because of me." He looked at her trembling figure. Her eyes glistened, not only with fear, but with shame. She had already lost everything, and now she feared she would bring ruin to the one person who had shown her kindness. He could see the way her thin chest rose and fell too quickly, her body bracing for rejection. Instead of answering, he rose and walked toward the door. She gasped softly, her body curling smaller, convinced he was going to throw her out. But instead, he checked the locks, sliding the bolt firmly into place. He pulled the curtain across the window, blocking out the pale moonlight that might have revealed her shadow. Her lips parted in surprise. Why? Why do you do this? He turned back, his voice calm but steady. You stay. Tonight, no one will find you. She shook her head furiously, her hair falling over her face. No, you do not understand. If anyone suspects... Her words cut off when they both froze. There was a sound outside, the crunch of footsteps on gravel. The woman's entire body stiffened, her breath catching in her throat. She pressed her back to the wall, clutching her rags like armor, eyes wide in terror. The man's hand instinctively reached for the iron rod leaning against the table. The footsteps drew nearer. Voices murmured outside, low but distinct. He recognized them, two of his neighbors, speaking in hushed tones. I saw her, one voice said. Near the old well, a widow alien, starving. She can't have gone far. Better to report it, the other replied. They're thieves, desperate ones. If she's lurking around, she'll cause trouble. Spence, the woman's hand shot to her mouth to smother a sob. Her eyes begged him silently, please, don't betray me. Her whole body trembled, pressed against the wall as if she could melt into it. The man moved quickly. He placed a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay quiet. Then he walked to the door, steadying his breath before calling out. Who's there? The footsteps stopped. It's us, came the answer. We thought we heard movement. There's talk of a stray alien in the area. Hungry ones get bold sometimes, sneaking into homes. Better be careful. The man forced a casual tone, though his heart was pounding. Nothing here, just me. You sure? One of them pressed. Check if you want, the man said firmly, hand tightening on the iron rod. There was a pause. Then the neighbor chuckled lightly. No need. Just keep your door locked. If she comes here, call the guards. The voices faded with the crunch of steps moving away. Slowly, the night returned to silence. The woman was shaking violently now, tears streaming down her face. She curled into herself, whispering over and over, They will take me. They will take me. The man set the rod aside and crouched near her, not too close, but enough for her to see his eyes. They won't, he said firmly. Not while you're here. She looked up at him, disbelief and fear mingling in her gaze. Why risk it? Why not throw me out like they would? You could be safe. He shook his head. Safe from what? From helping someone who needed it? Her breath hitched, her lips trembled, and she turned her face away, unable to hold his steady gaze. For years, she had lived only on rejection, cruelty, and hunger. Trust was a luxury she thought she would never know again. Yet here was a human, risking his own peace for her. Her voice was barely audible when she spoke. I do not deserve this. The man answered with quiet strength. Everyone deserves food and safety, even you. She broke then. Her shoulders shook with sobs she couldn't hold back, her body folding in on itself, as though all the pain and fear she had carried for years was spilling out at once. She pressed her hands over her face, her cries muffled but raw. The man didn't reach out to touch her. He didn't try to silence her grief. He simply sat there, a steady figure in the flickering firelight, letting her know she wasn't alone. The night outside remained cold, filled with whispers and suspicion, but inside the small house, a fragile shield of warmth and defiance had formed. When her sobs faded into soft whimpers, she looked at him again, eyes red and swollen. You are not like the others, she whispered. Maybe not, he said quietly. But tonight, you are safe here. That is enough. Her body slowly relaxed, though the fear never fully left her. She curled against the wall again, exhausted, her eyelids heavy. As she drifted toward sleep, her last thought was that for the first time since her husband's death, someone had stood between her and the world. Not to harm her, but to protect her. And the man, sitting watchful in the dark, knew the decision he had made tonight would change both their lives forever. The fire burned brighter now, throwing a soft golden light across the room. The woman sat near it, her knees drawn close, her eyes fixed on the flames. She no longer looked like the intruder who had stumbled in hungry and desperate. Instead, she looked like someone who was still afraid, but holding on to a fragile thread of safety. The human man moved quietly around the kitchen, tidying dishes, his presence calm and steady. She watched him carefully, her silver eyes full of questions. Finally, her voice broke the silence. "Why do you protect me?" The man paused, turning to face her. He leaned against the table, arms crossed, his gaze meeting hers without flinching. "Because you need it." Her lips trembled. She shook her head slowly, clutching the fabric of her ragged clothes. "No one has ever said that to me. My own people. They did not protect me. They threw me away when I had nothing left. Why would you, a human, do what they would not?" He thought for a long moment, his face unreadable. "Maybe because I know what it feels like," he said at last. Her brows furrowed. "You?" He nodded. "Loss, loneliness, being unseen. I know it too." His voice was quiet, but there was weight in it. He did not explain further, and she did not press him. She could feel there were scars in him as deep as her own, though hidden behind silence. Her hands shook as she leaned closer to the fire. "When I was cast out, I begged for someone to see me. Anyone. But every door stayed closed. Even when I was starving, even when I had nothing. I thought I was invisible. I thought maybe I was already dead." She lowered her head, her voice trembling. "And then you—" She stopped, as if the words were too heavy to speak. The man moved closer and placed another log in the fire. The crackle filled the silence. "And then I opened my door," he finished for her. She lifted her eyes to him, tears welling up again. "Yes." Her breathing slowed, but her body was still tense, like she didn't trust this safety to last. She whispered, "If the guards come again, if the neighbors ask more questions, you will be in danger. I should leave." He shook his head firmly. "No, tonight you stay." Her chest rose sharply as if the words struck her. She turned her face away, ashamed. "You are too kind, and kindness always has a price." The man studied her for a long time. He could see the weight of her fear and shame, the way she believed every good thing would eventually turn to cruelty. Slowly, he knelt by the fire, sitting across from her. "Not everything has a price." Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her silver eyes glistened, reflecting the flames. For the first time, she did not argue. She just stared at him, as if trying to believe him but unable to. They sat in silence for a while, the warmth wrapping around them like a fragile shield. The man poured water into a small cup and handed it to her. She hesitated before taking it, her fingers brushing his. She drew back quickly, as though the touch burned, but her cheeks flushed faintly, and she sipped the water carefully. As the warmth spread through her body, she whispered something so soft he almost didn't hear it. "I do not understand you, human." He smiled faintly. "You don't have to." Her shoulders shook with a sound caught between a laugh and a sob. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears slipping past her fingers. "I thought I had no more tears left. But you make them come." He didn't speak, only sat beside her, his presence quiet but strong. She leaned closer to the fire, resting her head against the wall. The flickering light painted her face with a softness he had not seen before. She looked less like the broken widow and more like someone who had once known joy, someone who might find it again. Her voice trembled as she spoke again. "Do you know what it means when someone protects a widow in my people's law?" He glanced at her. "What does it mean?" She swallowed hard. "It means they claim responsibility. It means they become her shield, and no one can touch her while he stands." The man's expression did not change, but his silence carried meaning. He knew what she was saying, though she herself seemed afraid to fully admit it. She lowered her gaze, clutching her hands together. "You are doing that for me, even when I do not deserve it." "Maybe you do," he said quietly. Her eyes widened, shining with disbelief. She shook her head, whispering, "You speak like you see something in me, but all I see is someone broken." He leaned slightly closer, his voice steady. "Broken things can still be mended." Her lips parted, and she stared at him, her breath unsteady. For a long time, she couldn't look away. Finally, she bowed her head, whispering so faintly it was almost a prayer. "Then let me stay near you, at least until I can breathe again." The man didn't answer with words. Instead, he stirred the fire, making the flames rise higher, spreading more warmth across the room. His actions were enough. She pulled the ragged blanket tighter around herself, curling up beside the fire, her eyes fluttering closed. Her body still trembled, but less from fear now, and more from exhaustion. Her last words before sleep took her were soft, spoken like a secret. Why do you protect me when even my own people would not? The man sat silently, watching her, the firelight dancing across his face. He had no answer that would satisfy her, no explanation that would make sense. All he knew was that the woman who had crept into his kitchen as a desperate thief was no longer just a stranger. She was someone who had awakened something in him he thought long dead, the will to stand for another. And as the night deepened, he knew this was not the end of her story, nor his. It was only the fragile beginning. The morning came with a pale light slipping through the curtains, but the peace inside the house did not last long. The man stood near the window, looking out carefully. His face was tense, his eyes narrowing at the sight of people gathering in small groups along the road, their voices carried in the crisp air, sharp and suspicious. Word had spread faster than he expected. Someone had seen the alien widow near his home, and now the colony was restless. He closed the curtain quickly and turned back. The woman sat by the fire, her hands cupped tightly around the last bit of warmth. She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw the fear already there, even before he spoke. "They are searching for you," he said quietly. Her face fell, her shoulders sagging under the weight of the words. She looked at the floor, shame burning across her cheeks. "I told you. They will not stop. They will find me, and then you will pay for hiding me." He shook his head. "I won't let that happen." Her voice trembled, breaking into desperation. "You don't understand. They do not forgive. If they find me here, they will punish you worse than me. I should leave before it is too late." She pushed herself to stand, but her legs were weak, and she nearly collapsed. The man rushed forward and steadied her, his hand firm on her arm. "You cannot even walk far," he said. "If you step outside now, they will catch you in minutes." Her chest heaved with panic. "Then let them take me. Better me than you." The man's jaw tightened. He had expected her fear, but not this broken resolve to sacrifice herself. He lowered his voice, firm but steady. "No, you are not going anywhere. If they come, they'll have to get through me first." Her eyes widened at his words, stunned. She shook her head wildly. "You cannot fight them. They are too many. You will be destroyed." "Maybe," he said. "But I would rather stand than let them drag you away while I do nothing." Tears filled her eyes at the weight of his words. She gripped his arm tightly, her voice breaking. "Why? Why would you risk everything for me? I am nothing to you. Just a widow, a burden, a stranger." He looked at her, his expression hard but not unkind. "You are not nothing. You are someone. That is enough." Her sob caught in her throat, and she turned her face away, unable to meet his eyes. She whispered, almost choking on the words, "I do not deserve you." Before he could answer, there was a knock at the door. Not gentle, not polite. A loud, hard knock that made the woman flinch as though struck. Her whole body trembled, and she clutched his sleeve like a child terrified of the dark. The man pressed a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay silent. She nodded quickly, but her breathing was ragged, her eyes wide with panic. He moved toward the door, every step deliberate, his muscles tense. The knock came again, louder this time, and a voice barked, "Open up! There have been reports of a stray alien in this sector." The woman curled into herself near the fire, covering her mouth to stop any sound. The man took a deep breath and opened the door a crack, just enough to see the two guards standing outside. "We're searching every home," one of them said. "It will not take long. Step aside." The man kept his hand on the door, not opening it wider. "I live alone. You can search if you want, but you won't find anything here." The guards exchanged a look. One of them leaned forward. "You are acting nervous. Why? Do you have something to hide?" His grip tightened on the door, but his voice stayed steady. "I'm not nervous. I just don't like being accused without reason. If you want to waste your time searching an empty house, go ahead." The guard narrowed his eyes. For a moment, the silence was unbearable. Inside, the woman's body shook so violently she pressed her forehead to her knees, praying they would not hear her heart pounding. Finally, the second guard shrugged. "Let's move on. She's probably hiding near the old barns anyway." The first guard grunted but stepped back. "Fine, but if we hear anything suspicious, we'll be back." The man closed the door firmly, locking it again. He stood there for a moment, his heart racing, then turned back. The woman was still curled on the floor, her shoulders trembling. He walked over and knelt beside her. "They are gone," he said softly. She looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. Her voice shook as she whispered, "You lied for me. You risked everything. They will not forget this. If they suspect you, they will come again." He nodded. "Then let them come." Her breath caught and she stared at him, her lips trembling. "Why are you doing this?" He met her gaze firmly. "Because you matter. Because you should not be hunted for being hungry. Because someone has to stand for you. And I will." She broke down then, unable to hold back the flood of emotion. She clutched his arm with both hands, her tears wetting his sleeve. "No one has ever said that, not even when I had family. No one." He let her cry, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, steady and grounding. The fire crackled beside them, and outside, the colony grew louder with suspicion. But in that small room, a fragile bond grew stronger, forged not by pity, but by choice. When her sobs finally quieted, she leaned against him, weak and weary. Her voice was faint, but he heard every word. "If they come again, I will not let you fall because of me. I will run. I will leave." He shook his head, his voice calm but unyielding. "You will not run. If they come again, we face them together." Her breath shivered, and she closed her eyes, torn between fear and the strange comfort his words brought. For the first time in years, she felt what it meant to have someone stand beside her. And though danger pressed at their door, the man's resolve only grew stronger. He knew the colony would not stop searching, that the risk would grow with each passing day. But as he looked at the fragile figure leaning against him, he also knew one thing with certainty: he would not let her go. Not now. Not ever. The night was darker than usual, heavy clouds covering the moon. The man sat near the fire, his ears alert, listening to every sound outside. He had lied to the guards, protected the woman, and now the risk was greater than ever. Any moment, someone might return, searching again. He knew the danger, but when he looked across the room and saw her sleeping curled up on the floor, he felt no regret. The alien widow stirred in her sleep, her thin body twitching as though caught in a nightmare. Her hands clutched at the ragged blanket, and a soft cry escaped her lips. The man stood and walked closer. He didn't wake her, but he placed another log on the fire so the warmth would reach her. She relaxed slightly, the tension in her face easing, and he sat back down, watching the flames dance. Hours later, she woke. Her eyes were wet, as though tears had followed her out of her dreams. She rubbed her face, blinking at him. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, in a voice so soft it was almost lost in the crackle of the fire, she said, "I thought I would wake up alone again, but you are still here." He gave a small nod. "I said I would protect you." Her lips trembled. She sat up slowly, hugging her knees. "I do not understand this. No one protects someone like me. Not in my world, not even in yours. But you stay." Her eyes filled with tears again, though this time there was something different in them, something like wonder. The man rose and went to the kitchen. From a small cupboard, he pulled out a loaf of bread and a bowl of stew he had prepared earlier. He set them down before her. She stared at the food, her silver eyes wide, as if each meal he gave her was more impossible than the last. "Eat," he said simply. Her hands shook as she picked up the bread. She took small bites, slower than before, no longer rushing like she would lose it. She let the warmth sink into her body, her eyes closing with every mouthful. Halfway through, she set the bread down carefully and looked at him. "This is the first time I have eaten 2 meals in one day since my husband died." The man's chest tightened, but he said nothing. He only pushed the bowl closer to her. She finished slowly, savoring every bite as though trying to memorize the taste. When the bowl was empty, she held it to her chest, her eyes filling again. "You gave me life twice," she whispered. "First last night, now again tonight. Do you know what that means to someone like me?" He shook his head, but she continued. Her voice broke as she spoke, but her words carried a strange strength. "It means hope. It means I am not cursed. It means I am still seen." She lowered her head, tears dripping onto the empty bowl. "You could have thrown me out, but you fed me. You could have called the guards, but you hid me. And now I do not know how to repay this." The man crouched beside her, his hand resting lightly on the edge of the bowl. "You don't need to repay anything." Her eyes lifted, wide and searching. "But why? Why me?" He met her gaze steadily. "Because you are alive. That is reason enough." For a long moment, she stared at him, her lips parting, but no words coming. Finally, she whispered, "You are not like anyone I have ever known. Silence fell between them again, but it was no longer heavy. It was warm, filled with something fragile and new. She set the bowl aside and leaned back, her body slowly relaxing. Later, when the fire burned lower and the house was quiet, she spoke again, her voice softer, almost shy. Where I come from, a meal is more than food. When someone feeds another, it is a promise. It means family. It means belonging. She paused, glancing at him nervously. Do humans see it the same way? The man thought about it. He had never considered a meal more than survival, but as he looked at her, fragile yet shining faintly with new hope, he understood. Maybe we do, he said at last. Her breath caught. She held his gaze, her silver eyes glimmering in the firelight. Then, with a shaky voice, she whispered, Then tonight, I found more than food. I found home. The words hung in the air, trembling with honesty. The man didn't answer, but he didn't need to. The warmth of the fire, the safety of the small room, and the quiet bond between them spoke louder than anything else. She leaned her head against the wall, her body curling into itself, but this time she wasn't a cornered animal. She looked like someone resting in safety, someone who finally believed she had a place again. Before her eyes closed, she whispered one last time, You came for food, but maybe you gave me life instead. The man sat watching her as sleep claimed her. His heart felt heavier and lighter at the same time, burdened by the risk, but lifted by the strange, unspoken bond now growing between them. Outside, the colony whispered of a widow to be hunted, a burden to be removed. But inside his house, she was no burden. She was someone who had found warmth again. And as the last log cracked in the fire, he knew that from this night forward, their lives were bound together. Not by pity, not by fear, but by a choice that could not be undone. He had fed her once, but what he had truly given was something greater, something that would change both their fates forever.